And I'm going to begin with a little story, and I won't tell the ending, but I'll just begin with the story. It starts on January 30th, 2010. A group of at least 20 hitmen parked themselves outside of a birthday party of a high school and college students. Near midnight, the assassins, later identified as a gang from the cartel, broke into a one-story house and opened fire on a gathering of nearly 60 teenagers. Outside, lookouts gunned down a screaming neighbor and several students who had managed to escape. 14 young men and women were killed, and 12 more were wounded before the hitmen finally fled. And you get that, folks? Does that sound like Sandy Hook, or as bad as Sandy Hook?
Yeah, way worse.
Way worse is right. There was no psychopath. This was demented murder. Having said that, where do you think those guns came from?
Can I guess?
Yes.
Fast and Furious?
Fast and Furious.
Yeah.
Those are alcohol, tobacco, and firearms sponsored guns that went into Mexico. And that was only one of 57 mass murders already documented that came at the hands of Fast and Furious guns.
And the reason why you're not hearing about it is because it happened in Mexico and not here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
And now I just want you guys out there to think about if we could have found the one person who bought the gun that this psycho Lanza used out there in Connecticut, he'd be buried under the jail.
Well, his mom bought it, actually.
I know.
That's it, yeah.
And she's killed. Or else I guarantee you, she would have gone to jail. We would have found something. But, having said that, we have on the air with us Bill Conroy, narconews.com, the man who broke this story and others, who broke the Fast and Furious story into American media, and we had to hammer away at it for months, if not years, before American media.
I think we have like Fast and Furious 6, 7, 8, 9, and maybe even 10 at this point.
Yeah. And Bill Conroy keeps at the cutting edge of this and other stories, and it's with great pride and happiness that I welcome Special Agent Bill Conroy back from...
Hey, Bill, you just got a badge. Special Agent Bill Conroy.
I don't think that's good, is it?
Absolutely. Well,
that's good. I think the stuff that you do, I think you need a badge, Bill.
It has served me well, so...
Yeah.
Now I don't feel so alone.
It makes you more of a target when you have a badge.
Not in our case.
Well, but you keep breaking these stories, and in the latest story, Fast and Furious blurs the line between cops, that was published on January 6, 2013, which you expert witness SWAT team members of Truth, you can get it at our website, expertwitnessradio.org. And Bill, thank God for you. I mean, thank God you're out there. Mainstream media does not pick this up. Tell us in substance, what did you uncover? And you actually quoted me in here, which I'm happy to say. Yeah, I made one of my more inflammatory remarks of all time.
That's so unlike you.
Yeah. Well, the gun laws in this country are quite complicated. That's why I ended up turning to Mike, because I know you got some background in it and a few other people. But the long and short of this story is one of the Fast and Furious weapons that of about 2,000 that made it into Mexico. An AK-47 showed up at a crime scene in Sinaloa, Mexico. It's a state on the coast, western coast, and this, the place where the Sinaloa cartel is based or out of. It was found at a crime scene where there's a shootout between the Mexican military and ostensibly some drug traffickers. You never really know who's shooting, and sometimes soldiers are not soldiers and cops are not cops, and you just don't know down there. But anyway, 5 people ended up dead, including a soldier and this Mexican beauty queen. And then by coincidence, nearby, within the same area, the shootout was like there was a car chase involved, and then so it covered a little territory. But in the same area, they found a automatic or a semi-automatic pistol, an FN Herzl, which is, they call them cop killers because they fire rounds that can go through bulletproof vests. And they ran a trace on this, and this was, released by Senator Grassley, he's out of Iowa, released this information that this pistol was traced back to an ATF supervisor. Not only an ATF supervisor, but the second, the assistant special agent in charge of Fast and Furious.
Wow.
Somehow, a gun he bought in Phoenix wound up at a crime scene in Mexico, along with an AK-47 that was traced back to this guy named Uriel Patino, who was one of the prime targets of Fast and Furious. Dug into it a little further and tried to figure out, what was going on with this gun sale. The other problem, what they discovered with the gun sale to the ATF supervisors, according to the senator, and then they released the forms that they got, the 4473s that you got to sign when you buy a gun.
Right.
He actually bought a total of 5 weapons in 2 separate purchases, in 3 separate purchases. And one of them, this pistol, and then 4 other handguns. And on all the forms, he didn't put the correct address. For 2 of the transactions, he put the Phoenix ATF address and then apartment number, and then the 3rd transaction, he put a strip mall in Phoenix. And that, from the best I can tell, and what Grassley said in the letter that he sent out, that's illegal, that you're supposed to put your residential address. And so we dug into that some more and talked to the owner of the gun store that sold him that gun. And it turns out that they had sold him a number of guns over the years, and in fact, they regularly is a matter of definition, but 1 or 2 guns a month they'll sell to law enforcers, and the guy said it wasn't uncommon that they would all, use their agency address, not, in other words, essentially not fill out the purchase forms correctly, which technically is a felony.
Yes, it is.
That's the substance of the story, and the real question is how many other guns made it into Mexico that were purchased by law enforcers.
Well, I was just going to say, I know it's kind of, it's a sinister question, but I think it bears asking. Were these straw purchases? And that's,
Interesting question.
Apparently, the owner of the gun store said he did not recall the specific transaction where that FN Herzl was purchased, but he said that the guy's name was Gillette, the ATF supervisor. Was he would recognize him if he came in. He came in there quite a bit, as did the lead prosecutor for Fast and Furious. Although the lead prosecutor, a guy named Hurley, he said didn't buy guns, he would buy knives, and he was more into air guns, like replica air guns, old, like Civil War era type air guns. He was a gun nut as well. So these guys frequented this gun store, and they were friends with the gun store owner. And he said, he did, sell a number of guns to this ATF supervisor. He was in Phoenix, I guess, 3 years, so over that period of time, beyond the 5 that show up in these transaction reports that were released by Grassley's office. Plus, he was selling to other law enforcers. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that they were not putting down the correct address on the forms. And then this Gillette, the ATF supervisor, his explanation for how the gun ended up in Mexico was, well, I ran into a little financial trouble. I had to sell the gun. I sold it over the internet. But I checked everything out, and I knew the guy was legit. So that, as I called around to sources, that just didn't, all this just doesn't make sense. And well, law enforcement, first of all, you wouldn't put the agency address on a firearms purchase transaction if you were undercover, which is what the gun owner said. Well, maybe these guys were undercover, because as soon as that gun is, anybody trying to public and then figure out you're undercover, because that shows up on the form when they check it, right?
Right.
Well, you're going to know you're with an agency. And it couldn't be an official agency purchase, because we dug up records showing that they actually have to get a letter, and it has to be signed and approved by another higher up in order to purchase a weapon for official use from a gun store. So this should have been personal use purchase.
Right.
But if that's the case, then why are they selling all these guns, personal use, without getting correct residential addresses for these law enforcers? And I don't know, maybe that's a common practice all over the country, but it sounds like it's problematic for the agency.
Okay, now I'm going to channel I'm channeling my experience in internal affairs. I'm also channeling my experience with agents and cops who kind of walk the line, and their mentality and their logic. So before I do that, I hit on something after you and I spoke, William, and you quoted me. Some things dawned on me that I think we should make public right now, and get our listeners involved. And I think I'm going to give you another assignment, Bill, at the end of this. But I want to read my quote. Well written, by the way, because it's important to consider in this. William checked with me because I am a court-qualified expert in this, and this is what I told William. He says, however, Mike Levine, a veteran law enforcement officer who worked for years as a DEA deep undercover agent and earlier as an ATF agent, is quite blunt in his assessment of where the buck should stop in cases in which law enforcers purchase weapons without following the letter of the law. Levine's take posted to Narco News via email. Because you are a federal agent, a cop, MI5, or whatever, you must follow the same law that all U.S. citizens follow. You don't get to circumvent anything, and I wrote like a crazy person, anything in big block letters, not a syllable of the law. They, law enforcers, inappropriately using an agency address on a firearms transaction form should have a big problem. I spent a quarter of a century designing undercover sting operations, supervising them, reviewing them. I'm still reviewing them and teaching this stuff. I tried to envision a situation, any situation, that would justify buying a gun under a false identification, and cannot even imagine one. You hear that, Congress? Please call me. I'll testify to that. If an unregistered gun, for example, is needed for a reason I cannot imagine, ATF and DEA and any other agency making arrests have warehouses full of seized guns that haven't been destroyed yet at any given moment. But like I said, I cannot even dream up a reason to justify what these agents are doing. If I had this investigation while I was OPR, Office of Professional Responsibility, they'd be on the other side of my desk, disarmed and Mirandized. Levine added that in Gillette's case and in the case of any other law enforcers who allegedly purchased weapons from Legendary Guns or any other weapons dealer using inaccurate residential addresses, the only way to assure no greater harm is done than has already played out in Fast and Furious is for Senator Grassley or someone else with investigative power to trace each gun to where it went after the fraudulent purchase. But as we know, if what they're doing can make some political hack look incompetent, Levine added, then they, the suspect law enforcers, are going to walk, even for complicity to homicide.
Everybody walks.
Yeah.
Everybody in government walks.
Now, I sat there and, again, I put on my internal affairs hat, my undercover hat, the knowledge I have of a lot of people. I wrote an article that's out there on the internet, by the way. It might interest some of you. It's called Going Bad. And all the experience that I've had with very bad cops and very bad agents. And this is what dawned on me. Why, you and I discussed this, Bill. I said, there's got to be a buck in this for these guys. Why would they put the agency address on a gun purchase form? And when I knew we were going to do this show, I woke up screaming at midnight. And it came to me, William, what you have to do is somehow get hold of, now this is the government form 1012, that's an expense voucher, and or the amount of money that this Gillette pulled for what they call PEPI, purchase of evidence and purchase of information. Because my bet right now is that the reason they use that address is because they vouched it. That is, the government paid for those guns, not them. and they sold it and made the full profit themselves. That is a very likely possibility. This is the only
problem with that is,
yeah.
according to the ATF, they would have been violating. Of course, this is very possible what you're saying, because nobody, even the gun store owner, I don't think was aware of this.
He couldn't be aware of it.
2011 that said that you cannot, purchase. A law enforcer cannot purchase a gun for official purposes, which would be what you're saying about, for evidence or information or whatever, using the agency money, without a letter, an agency letterhead signed by another supervisor, not the same person doing the gun purchase, and then they don't have to fill out the form 4473 or go through a background check.
Yeah, but I think what Mike is saying is that they didn't put it down that they were using it to purchase a weapon. Am I right?
It could be. The only way we'll know. The only way we'll know is to get hold of.
See if they're corresponding.
If you do, if you're Congress and you have congressional investigators, or maybe a FOIA request might do it, but I doubt it. Is to ask for, during this period, all expense vouchers, paid and signed for by anybody who bought those guns and put the agency address on it. Now,
that would make sense. You're right.
Because
if they were willing to lie about what the money was, what the purchase was.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there is no logic unless there's a buck in it somewhere. There's no logic for them doing it.
The only other thing I was told, and I didn't put it in the story, and just because I couldn't. I mean, I'll say it, but I don't know that it's true, and that's just from one source. I had gotten information earlier that some of the law enforcers threw guns into these shipments, and they supposedly had tracers on them. And at least in the case that I was told about, there was a leak somewhere, and when the guns crossed the border, the tracers, which I guess are like the size of a pin, they're really small, and they attach on the gun, were all removed across the border, so they lost track of the guns. Mm. So, but that just didn't completely line up with everything.
You're making me crazy. Yeah. They got these, they got these tracers in. Okay, how many ATF agents are in the country? Let's say they put 2,600 guns across the border into Mexico. Was there a tracer in every one of them? Because if you don't have a tracer in every one of them, then the whole idea is idiocy. Yeah. Now
they didn't.
Yeah, they did.
One other thing.
But Congress is okay, happy. Oh, well, they had a good idea, tracers in the guns. But what numbskulls? Yeah.
Is assuming this is a hypothetical, because I don't want to apply it to this specific case for various reasons, but hypothetically, an ATF agent or other agent was actually corrupt and selling these guns into Mexico knowingly. And was, the straw purchase. Now remember, the AK-47 was found that was being, the straw purchaser that bought that AK-47 that was found in the same location as the ATF guy's gun, was one of the chief targets of the investigation, which means the ATF was investigating this guy. So it almost sounds like that was in the same batch of guns that went down there. That's a possibility someone threw out, which means maybe this guy, or a guy like him, let's say, was buying guns for himself, and then also buying guns to sell through this straw purchaser, saying, let's cut a deal here, make some money, these are going anywhere, and no one's watching them. And he somehow just mixed the guns up. And that's how this all kind of surfaced. In other words, he filled out a legitimate form for the one he bought for himself, and then he bought another one like it to make some money, that or how many, and threw it into the shipment that the straw purchaser was selling for thousands of dollars, and he gets his cut later, but he accidentally puts the wrong gun in the wrong box. They get mixed up. Does that make sense? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but again, my mind keeps going back to...
It's possible, but how many have been traced back now? How many?
How many guns have been traced back to law enforcers?
Yeah, exactly.
This is the first one we know of.
Okay.
Yeah, at this point.
All right.
But I mean, you don't find them. Again, I'm not saying that happened here, because that was a theory thrown out. That's all that is, and there's no other evidence to support that anyone was doing this in this particular case. But when these guns go down there, I mean, they'll go down. If they sell 20 or 30 of them, they're going to go to a certain cell usually, and so when you find two of them together, there's a suspicion that they were part of the same shipment.
Right.
Well, let's suppose you are a corrupt ATF agent, and I'm certainly not saying that Mr. Gillette is corrupt. I'm talking about
It's a hypothetical.
hypothetical. And what I'm saying is how I would. There's certainly enough probable cause here. That's the nice police and legal term that we use to justify a full investigation of the man. He did commit a crime, and right now, as we're talking, it seems to be senseless. I mean, why put the government agency and then sell it to Mexico? Certainly, he up to now has no fear of guns turning up in Mexico being traced back, because 57 of them were outed. 57 crime scenes were outed by Univision. That's the major South American. Think of what these people think of us in South America and Mexico. God almighty. But it was outed in South America and Mexico, not the United States. 57 crime scenes where these guns were traced back to Fast and Furious, and nothing is done. Absolutely nothing. So you're a corrupt ATF agent, and you, let's say, for example, continuing my hypothetical example, and you buy a gun for, say, $1,500 once a month, and you put it on. You fill out the Federal Firearms Act form by putting in the ATF address, and in your mind, that justifies you taking it off from your voucher or taking it off as purchase of evidence, and down it goes to Mexico, and you sell it in Mexico. Let's say for triple what you paid for it. So you're making an extra couple of thousand every gun that you do that with, and it's not even a profit. The government's paying for it. That's why you put theoretically
spending a dime.
So you can't not investigate that possibility. So how do you investigate that possibility? Number one, you pull the man's financial records. How did you pay for the gun? Where is it? And look for income around that time. Now, let's say you've got an influx of several, but close to the price of the gun, deposit into an account, pay a payment of a credit card or whatever, and you trace that back, and you find that is a green government expense.
I have a question,
Yeah.
and I know there may not be a simple answer to it, but when you personally sell a gun within the states, I'm assuming this is probably a state law thing, is there any requirement in terms of what records you keep when you sell a weapon?
Well, each...
Yeah, they got to keep
Yeah.
the Form 4473 that is filled out by the purchaser, and
No, I'm sorry, Bill. Let me interrupt. I wasn't clear. What I mean is, if I go to Legendary Guns and I buy a handgun, and then I go sell it to another private party, is there any responsibility for me as the private individual who bought the weapon to maintain any records of how I disposed of it? Because my point is, if one of these ATF agents bought a weapon and then sold it to somebody, they should. If that requirement exists, then there would be some kind of record. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but the only requirement that I'm aware of is if a Federal Firearms Act dealer is in the mix.
Gotcha.
And that's the whole Sally Castile case is premised on how many guns makes it a business versus a hobby.
Right.
And that's kind of ambiguous in state by state and prosecutor by prosecutor.
Well, that's why I asked, because it would be another way to trace it.
That's a good question, Mark, because
it is.
These are the kind of things that came up in this story over and over. There's so much. Part of it is not clear, and it's different state by state. It's enforced differently. It's very difficult to tell what the law is sometimes on the fringes. There's some clear-cut things, but I know the firearms dealer has to keep these records, but he doesn't send them to ATF. The only time they go to ATF is if it's multiple guns purchased.
Yeah.
If it's one gun, then it just stays with the dealer, and then if somebody wants to come in and look at it like ATF later, they have to have a record of that.
Right.
That's the only record I know for sure exists.
Well, and I know this is a little bit off topic, but considering what everybody's been talking about with gun control and Sandy Hook, it occurs to me, if we can't, and I'll use the word cluster if you know what, if it's this much of a cluster F to find out what an ATF agent did with a weapon, then you go, you know what, maybe we should just have a federal law for guns and forget about state by state, because this is crazy. It's crazy that you can't.
He violated it. He violated it.
Well, I understand.
Different. It's kind of. Arizona and Texas are very, more lax in terms of the way they deal with guns than the Northeast. Just having lived in the Midwest, in the South, in Texas here, it's different. But there is there would be a way to see if this guy bought this gun, because in this case for sure there was, because it was traced back. But they should be able to go to Legendary Guns now, and if it was a single purchase, there should be a record of that purchase at Legendary Guns.
Right.
They can get a hold of when it happened, all the information on there filled out. That's how they traced it, because the ATF obviously had to get this into their tracing system. And the other weird thing about this is the first trace on this gun was run through Mexico City ATF, and it showed nothing. Mexico had asked for 2 traces, and the second trace is the one where it popped up and showed the agent.
Huh.
And then the other odd thing is one of the transactions was reported unless it was a typo, which shouldn't be, a year after it was made.
It's horrible.
Real oddities in the paperwork.
Well, it's horrible. I'm reminded, all these years I've been a trial consultant and an expert witness, traveling around testifying in different courts. We're in a horrific situation, my listeners, ladies and gentlemen. A horrific situation where it's no wonder there's a problem with respect for the law when the law enforcers and Congress all look the other way at crimes that us ordinary citizens are going to jail for. And I was documenting up for one of our shows back then. We documented a few people who were being prosecuted for straw purchases because their guns showed up at crime scenes in the U.S. and they went to jail for it. Now you have an agent. Fast and Furious. They got away with murder. So far, absolute murder. They should have been indicted for homicide, but they're still in their jobs, which is astounding.
You are listening to the Expert Witness Radio Show. We are speaking with Bill Conroy from Narco News. We're going to take a break for 60 seconds. Everybody just stand by for one moment. You are listening to the Expert Witness Radio Show. For more information on tonight's show, please visit us on the web at www.expertwitnessradio.org.
Welcome back to the Expert Witness SWAT team of truth, operating like 2 maniacs here. I feel like I'm in a tank turret, Mark.
I got my helmet on.
Who's driving? And Mark, I think, WBAI is why we're on the air.
It is, absolutely.
And BAI needs help. So tell them about BAI Buddy, all right, Mark?
You got it. WBAI, the station that we broadcast the Expert Witness Radio Show from, is listener supported, and as a result, BAI has to go through fundraisers all year long, and they come up with this idea called BAI Buddies, which is a really neat idea. The idea behind being a BAI Buddy is somebody who signs up to make a recurring donation to BAI using a debit card or a credit card or electronic funds transfer. And the great thing about it is if enough people do it, it can eliminate fund drives altogether. And, nobody, I listen to public radio all the time, and there's nothing worse than, turning on your favorite radio station and having to listen to people pitch. And the people who are pitching, including us, don't like it very much either, but it's what we have to do to keep the doors open on the station. So here's just a little math for you. If just 400 people signed up for a $10 a month donation, we could eliminate an entire month's fund drive, which is pretty neat. So anyway, you can go to our website, expertwitnessradio.org, and there'll be a link right on the show page for tonight's show to go to the BAI Buddy form at the BAI website, or you can just go to WBAI.org and you'll see an icon right there for BAI Buddy. But if you appreciate the show and you appreciate the station, please support BAI, because without them we wouldn't be on the air. Okay, so with that, let's get back to, we have hanging patiently with us on the line Bill Conroy. Mr. Conroy?
Yeah. Can you do anything with what we just gave you, William?
In terms of research, right.
Can you push this investigation into the purchase to determine whether or not, who paid for the gun? And Congress doesn't seem to be doing it. Maybe the three of us should do it.
It's a legitimate question, and any other journalists listening to the show have a heads up to make that inquiry.
Sure.
You could try for you. They probably would exclude it on law enforcement exemption, but Grassley's office is still looking into this. Maybe someone from their office is listening and might actually be onto that already. We'll see.
If not, one of you members of the Expert Witness Suite SWAT Team of Truth, please download this show.
Yeah, start filing FOIA requests, will you?
Send it to Grassley's office or whoever, anybody. I mean, we're in a horrific situation where you can commit murders after murder after murder, as long as it's not in the news. It's like nobody did anything. We call it political. Isn't that a shame? I mean, we call it political if you go after people in the Department of Justice who sponsored, ratified, rubber-stamped the sending of 2,600 guns to Mexico. And as I said, my sources tell me that these guns are showing up in crime scenes in the U.S., and ATF is not releasing the fact that they're fast and furious guns under the rubric of it's an ongoing investigation and we can't reveal it. When will it ever be revealed? I don't know. We've lost our country sometimes, I think, haven't we?
Yeah.
Mm. Well, having said that, now you guys who look things up on the internet, tell me if I'm wrong. Anybody know who George Parker is right now? Raise your right hand. Mark? No?
Nope.
George Parker is probably the greatest con man in history. Definitely Parker approached the gullible as the owner of the Brooklyn Bridge. You know the expression, I got a bridge to sell you? Yeah, in 1883, and after explaining the fortune to be made through toll booths, he would sell the bridge in the 1800s for as much as $50,000. Parker went to jail for life for this, but not before selling the Statue of Liberty, Grant's Tomb, and Madison Square Garden, and leaving us the expression, I've got a bridge I'd like to sell you. Now, George Parker was born in 1870, and he was one of the boldest con men in American history, and he's remembered as one of the most successful con men in the history of the United States. He managed to sell, get this, the Brooklyn Bridge twice a week for many years before being caught. George died in prison in 1936. Now, why? Congress has been selling the American people the Brooklyn Bridge weekly. So I make a suggestion that a flag be run up in the halls of Congress for George C. Parker. You know how the CIA has, and the truth you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, George C. Parker knew the truth. Should have run for Congress. He wouldn't have died in prison, would he?
So we're going to call for a George Parker Day in honor of Congress.
In honor of Congress, George Parker Day.
Oh, that's too funny. That is too funny. Hey, Bill.
Yes.
You have a second article which actually you came out with in December, and we never had a chance to cover it because we weren't on the air with you. It's banks are where the money is in the drug war.
Right. Right.
And we figured we would ask you about it because we didn't get a chance to cover it before. And this is a long article. By the way, I just want to say, for those of you who just tuned in with us, we're speaking with Bill Conroy from Narco News, who is just an awesome researcher and writer. And he just, he's a pit bull when it comes to stories. He just grabs them and doesn't let go. And this article about banks is huge. So I'll put a link up to the site, but you should definitely go read it. Anyway, Bill, so tell us about the story.
Well, this story came out before this huge British bank, but they got a huge operation in the United States and Mexico as well. HSBC, entered into a deferred prosecution agreement and agreed to pay $1.9 billion, which as a fine essentially and penalty. Sounds like a lot, except they got $2.5 trillion in assets and had a $22 billion profit in 2011. So it's really a slap on the wrist. And this story took you through a number of banks over the years who have been caught for, essentially money laundering. They're laundering money for narco traffickers, and threw their hands up and point their fingers at the other guy. Well, I didn't know anything. We didn't know anything. Well, whatever. None of them ever criminally convicted. None of their officers convicted. Other than one bank, which we get into the story, that was actually had relations or links to the CIA, Riggs Bank. But this HSBC, kind of the poster child, they had a backlog of 17,000 alerts identifying possible suspicious activity, essentially money laundering. They had $15 billion in bulk cash transactions that just went through their bank unmonitored, and $60 trillion in wire transfer activities. It was so bad that the narco traffickers designed special boxes that would fit precisely inside the teller windows in their affiliate banks in Mexico, so you could just shove this cash through and deposit it. And they were. This was massive amounts of money, and that same. It was taking in tons of money from this money transfer house, Casa del Cambio, in Mexico, that was owned and run by the Sinaloa cartel. And Wachovia got busted for that. They paid a fine and got a deferred prosecution agreement. They were doing business with the same money house as this huge British bank. So the story just goes through all these scenarios of all these huge banks that get basically caught essentially red-handed, not paying attention or caring or even complicit in money laundering, and get a deferred prosecution agreement and say, well, fix this and go on your way.
Well, like I say to Mike all the time, nobody ever gets busted.
Well, all these different thoughts come to mind. Historically, we have evidence before our Congress that was made secret thanks to the new Secretary of State about to be, John Kerry, during the Kerry Commission hearings. Felix Milian Rodriguez, who was the Medellin cartel money launderer, who was convicted of laundering $1 billion worth of drug money back in 1980 or thereabout. And Milian wanted to speak to Congress, and he made this. I have the actual transcript. Now, how did I get the actual transcript? Because the left hand and the right hand in this country don't know what it's doing. They don't know what's secret, what's not secret. This transcript was given to a lawyer as part of discovery. The lawyer gave it to me because, I was at that time kind of notorious on this show, and I outed it. And basically, Felix Milian Rodriguez, the Medellin cartel money launderer, testified before our Congress that he had made deals with every major bank in the United States to launder drug money. They knew it was drug money. He named the people, and what did we do? Nothing.
Seal the testimony.
So now we come to.
And didn't Michelle Chusodowski didn't he say? He said if you pulled all the drug money out of the economy, the banks would all collapse.
Yeah. That, yep. By the way, Michelle Chusodowski, professor of economics, University of Ottawa, was an International Monetary Fund advisor, and he said that to an audience of international journalists covering the war on drugs in Paris, and never outed here in the United States. No. Never. It was news everywhere but the United States.
But Lindsay Lohan had a car accident.
Why is that? William, you're a journalist. I don't understand it. This is outrageous. You said it best. Here, let me read from your article. This is perfect. Quote Bill's article. Imagine if you or I were pulled over by the cops while transporting in the trunk of your car even $10,000 in bills that traced back to individuals suspected of being involved in illegal activities.
Rikers.
Yeah, forget it.
Arsoning.
Forget, you got 10,000 in your trunk. All they do is they bring a dog up, and then the cop says, well, the dog alerted. You're going. You and your money are gone. 10,000 in bills. What are the odds that we would walk away with only a traffic ticket? Thank you. Oh, my God. That's essentially what is happening in these cases involving big banks. No, it's so much worse. Bill, how frustrated do you get? I mean, when you sit, you report this when mainstream media simply ignores it or glosses it over lightly, and you in-depth reporting that should be part of an indictment.
Yeah, no, the reality is like that same story I said, basically that the so-called drug war is a little more than an immense drug deal. And it's kind of like covering Vegas, As long as you're winning, they leave you alone. It's only the losers that get pinched, and it's a sad game. It's not about right or wrong or about justice. It's about the money.
Well, it's interesting because when you look at the I will steal a phrase from a completely different subject, the giant sucking sound of the money that comes through the banks, through the money that gets thrown into the drug war in terms of arming and weapons providers and armor providers and vehicle providers and radio providers, you name it. I mean, there's a million of them.
It's more complicated.
And the whole prison industrial complex, which gets labor out of prisons and, makes money, Sodexo and Marriott and all them who make money from feeding people in prison and cleaning the prisons, and you just go, wow, the money is just astounding.
Well, it's kind of like we're leaving Afghanistan. What does Afghanistan have to support any anti-Taliban efforts? Heroin.
Yeah.
That's it. Do you really think that we will be permitted to take down any Afghan heroin lord? Does anybody really think that's ever going to happen? No, but you can put 1,000 people in jail for selling an ounce of heroin.
Well, I think my bet, and you would know way better than me, but my bet is knowing, like, what goes on in the streets of New York or Chicago or Detroit or anywhere else. You have good cops, you have cops, you have bad cops. The bad cops are going out and saying, every once in a while we're going to have to bust somebody to make it look good, but in the meantime, we're just letting the money rake in, Well,
it's like this article I wrote. Again, I urge everybody out there, get hold of it. It's on the internet, going bad. And it's the same situation that I wrote about all those years ago. It hasn't changed at all. That is, cops are put into such a dirty game that it's almost entrapment that you go bad.
Yeah.
You take this, we're talking about this ATF agent Gillette. So he looks around and he sees that his agency is violating the law hand over fist. And I'm not saying he did that, but any ATF agent who's a little on the edge, let's say, who's got the temptation to make an extra buck, all he has to do is look around and say, oh, my God.
Yeah, why not?
Why not?
Yeah, and it's not a buck. It's,
Mike, I should take a moment because you guys are talking about good cops that get screwed over. And Sparky McLaughlin, right?
Very well, yeah. I know him for a lot of years.
He's got a book out about what happened to him.
Yeah, we're going to have him on the air, I think, Mark. I have his book,
Same guy. This is the guy that, was... Read the book if you can get a hold of it.
I've been reading it. He sent it to me, and I told him that, if we still have a radio show, yeah, we're going to have him on the air. What do you think, Mark? I think I'll send it to you.
Yeah, send it to me.
Email. Yeah, it's a great book.
It's a good first-hand account of what happens to good cops.
Yeah.
on the streets and how they get caught up in the mechanizations of the bureaucracy and the intrigue of the various agency interfighting and turf wars, and that case is about them busting some people on the streets of Philadelphia that led back to essentially a money laundering. They're selling heroin on the streets of Philadelphia to raise cash to fund a political candidacy in the Dominican Republic.
Yeah, CIA operation. It was a CIA operation.
It reads like a movie script.
I wish I wouldn't have made that bust,
Yeah.
But they followed it up and they all got screwed.
Yeah. So. Well, I can lose my marbles if I start talking about the criminal inept agency again and their informers. We have to do a whole show on this, but the CIA calls their informers agents, which is kind of confusing because
no kidding.
They call these guys agents, and out they go. With American taxpayer funds, and they're given a license to commit crimes, to traffic in drugs. Good cops are destroyed to protect them, for some vague goal that really doesn't seem to have anything to do with anything in a sane world. Now, I underline sane world.
Well, that's something that occurred to me. This whole thing is, it's human nature. You work in a workplace, and there's always going to be some bad people working in a workplace. That's just the way it is. Human beings aren't perfect, and you just hope that 80% of them are good people, and 20% of them are, 10% are not so good, and 10 are really bad. But the more you're in this world, the more jaded you get. And if you're looking around and you're going, "Wow, everybody around me is doing really great, and all I have to do is this one little thing, and I got $2,500 in my pocket."
Well, it gets worse.
And there you go.
You take CIA. We put up on YouTube the video of Judge Robert Bonner saying CIA are drug smugglers. They got caught smuggling drugs, and nobody did anything. So when you have that kind of a background, and you are given the kind of freedom where billions are going through your hands, and nobody's checking, and you can do no wrong, what do you expect to happen?
Well, I think it's part of it is that they don't play the expectation game. It's about the profit. It's about the profit, whether it be power, whether it be a job, whether it be somebody calling in a favor. But nobody thinks about the holistic picture. Nobody's thinking about the big picture here, and I think that's what
I think about. I go all the way back to the late '60s when I was teamed up with New York City police undercover cops, and what they were doing at that time. I couldn't believe it, but the situation was such. You got to read Serpico. He nailed it. I mean, he told it the way it really was. I was an outsider looking in, teamed up with plainclothesmen, and I was flat out horrified. Didn't know what to do with it. Absolutely, it was so big, so corrupt. It was a system that was so bad that if you got into it, you had to go bad.
Yeah.
It wasn't a matter of a good guy, Serpico.
And that's a good point.
Yeah.
In situations like what's happening in Mexico, it's not like people are that different because they're from Mexico or from Europe or from Malaysia or wherever. The system that is allowed to rot eventually sucks everyone in. And so, there you either take the money or you get the lead, right? And that's all the way up to the top of their government. And we're not quite there yet, but people let it go long enough and run far enough, it can happen here.
Listen, we're awful close. When you talk about the bank story, it's just...
I agree. We're further, in my lifetime, we're further toward that than we're away from it.
Yeah. I mean, you look at the bank story, or you look at even just corporate influence in general. I'm not anti-corporate, but I also think that one of the big problems with capitalism as a whole is that morals just fall off the table, and that's where it starts going south. You get a really big company that is doing something that's like environmentally unsound, and so they do it, and they do it for 3 years, because you know what? At the end of 3 years, the EPA, if we're lucky, if we're blessed, the EPA finds out they did it, and they say, okay, we're going to prosecute you, or we're going to fine you, and the fine is $250,000. And over the past 3 years, they made 78 million, and they go $250,000 is just the cost of doing business, and they don't change what they do, and so money talks, And
so what do you? I'm supposed to. By the way, listeners, I'm supposed to be speaking, I think, in March at Bloomberg College. The topic is going to be the undercover life, and in Pennsylvania. And these are a lot of police science students and a criminal justice program. And what do you tell young guys, young kids, young women who are going to go into a career in law enforcement, and I know they're going to run into situations where, as my dearly departed father used to say, a definition of hell is being the only guy playing straight in a dirty card game, and they're going to be that. You're going to go in bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, you're fresh out of school, you've got these ideals of what honesty is, but you look closely at what everybody's doing around you. Look at our Congress.
Well, but I'll tell you, you started that out, you posted as a question, and I would say my answer is tell them exactly what you just said, except that the whole idea is if you're going to do this, it's not only you, that you can't be the only guy playing straight, and the only way you're all going to stick together and make this work is if you all try to play it straight. Because that's the only way it changes,
I have to tell you that I was one crazy SOB because I tried to be that and paid very hefty price. I tried to be the guy playing straight, to scream and say the emperor is butt naked. I'm out there screaming. I said, everybody, you're all spending trillions, but the emperor is butt naked. It's all a lie. You understand? And what happens? I almost pay with my life.
Sure.
And it's going to happen to nothing's changed. That's what's scary to me.
Yeah.
Nothing at all has changed. We have a George Parker Congress. They won't do.
Mike's got a new phrase now. It's the George Parker Congress.
Yeah.
We have a new year, and we have new generations, coming forward. So
Yeah.
Well, and that was my
focus
point.
in the
Is
future, that's all there is. That's all we got.
Yeah. We do.
So Mike's got one other thing to cover.
Yeah, I know you guys love a mystery out there, and I follow mysteries when I get hold of one, and there's a great one in Scotland Yard in London. And get this, one of MI6 codebreaker, Gareth Williams, was found dead, locked in a sports bag.
I'm sorry, Gareth's family. I'm sorry I laughed.
His naked body, but it was finally ruled after an intensive investigation, and I have the results.
Don't tell me it was a suicide.
Yes, it was.
Oh my God! He killed himself and then locked himself in a bag.
Get on a plane to England.
Gareth Williams.
Yeah.
Well,
they found that he was not the victim of a hit by the security services, as many believed. Scotland Yard has found this after conducting a review of the case. Dr. Fiona Wilcox, I feel like we're at the Downton Abbey. Dr. Fiona Wilcox, the Westminster coroner, said earlier this year that she could not rule out the involvement of the security services in the death, which set off a furor. Got me interested.
They zipped up the bag.
Yeah. The ruling sparked a review by Scotland Yard's murder squad, which has re-interviewed his colleagues from MI6 and taken DNA samples from everyone over the last few months. Detectives had believed that someone else must have locked the codebreaker in the bag and launched a search for a mysterious Mediterranean couple. They keep showing up everywhere, don't they? Who were later ruled out of inquiries, but detectives now believe that he probably died alone. I don't know if I believe this. Do you, Mark? It doesn't. They've been unable to find any trace of anyone who should not have been in the flat, and every reason to believe that Gareth may have climbed into the bag himself and been unable to get out. A source close to the inquiry said, "I climbed into
These people have been watching too many Bond movies."
Why? Well,
was he dismembered or all in one?
Well, no, he was not dismembered. He was in one. The keys to the red North Face holdall. What is that?
A holdall. It's a big bag. It's like a duffel bag.
Is it a duffel bag?
I think so.
Well, holdall were found in the bottom of the bag when Mr. Williams, the keys to the bag,
were in the bag with him?
Were in the bag with Mr. Williams' naked body.
That's just bizarre. Bizarre.
Two experts, get this. See, the Brits, they're absolutely...
They're on it, huh?
See, I would have done exactly what they did. Two experts tried a total of 400 times to lock themselves into the
bag. Right there is a Monty Python episode if I've ever heard of one.
And one claimed that even world-famous escapologist Harry Houdini would have struggled to squeeze himself inside. This goes on. But days after the inquest verdict, a retired Army sergeant showed how it was possible to climb into a similar North Face bag and lock it from the inside. I want to meet this guy.
Me too.
We got to have.
He needs a reality series.
Right.
Oh man. All right, listen, we're up against it, so we have to wrap. Mr. Conroy, it has been a pleasure as always. Thanks for coming and sitting on the Expert Witness Radio Show, Psychiatrist Couch.
Yeah, thanks, Bill.
I appreciate the time, guys.
Our next episode, if anybody who's listened to the show for any period of time knows that we have railed about the misuse of informants like forever. Well, Project Censored has released their list for top censored stories of last year, and number 5, either 4 or 5 on the list, is that the vast majority of terror plots that have been broken over the past 3 or 4 years, 5 years, maybe even longer, have all been FBI stings with paid informants. And you know how we've been about paid informants. Well, the guy who wrote the stories, including a book called Terror Factory, that really broke this in Project Censored for the last year, his name is Trevor Aronson, and we are going to have him on for the next episode.
Oh, yeah.
And I know Mike is going to have a heyday with this one.
You don't want to miss this one.
We might even do 2 hours.
Yeah.
In the meantime, please go to the website, read about PAI Buddy, and thank you for listening. You got to say goodbye to the lovely Laura Kavanaugh.
Mi esposa Laura Kavanaugh Levine. Allá voy, mamita, te adoro, te extraño mucho. I love my wife, Laura. I'm going home, honey.
And as I say every time, thank you wherever and whenever you listened, and we'll see you next time. You all take care.